These are becoming works of art, incredibly dressy and yet practical at the same time. I'm falling in love with these annual calendars as my favorite collection, my gosh. Sepehr, great to see you again.
Joe, good to see you as well.
So today I see we're going to be talking about some calendar watches. Being a Patek Philippe specialist, I'd like to know if you can enlighten me any on what is Patek Philippe's interest or fascination with calendar watches.
For Patek Philippe, it's really amazing to know that they have a very, very strong history with calendar watches. Their first perpetual calendar was invented in 1875. At that time, the company was less than 40 years old.
Right.
A perpetual calendar is a complication that automatically takes into account the calculation of length of the months, 30 days and 31 days, and also length of the years, 365 or 366 days. So it calculates the leap year.
Wow.
And they only need one correction per 100 years.
Next question.
Yes. Every 100 years, one correction.
That's incredible mechanical science to me.
Yeah.
Hard to process. Well, I noticed that on the tray there that we have a variation of calendar that we haven't discussed yet, the annual calendar. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe that was invented also by Patek Philippe. But why would they work themselves backwards into a less complicated calendar invention? What would be the reason to make an annual calendar? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
It is actually a very smart question and a very interesting fact that they introduced a less complicated watch after having a perpetual calendar in production for many, many years. Thanks to Mr. Philippe Stern's determination to target younger generation of watch enthusiasts and younger people who would admire rare handcrafts. He came with this idea to make a less complicated version of a perpetual calendar. Annual calendar has more components than the perpetual calendar, but it's less complicated. So yes, this complication, which is widely used by many other brands today, was invented by Patek Philippe, and they patented this complication in 1996.
Do you have an example of anything going that far back?
Absolutely. I actually have the very first annual calendar that was invented in 1996, the original reference number 5035.
Oh, I'd love to see it.
This absolutely stunning timepiece, the reference number 5035 in 18-karat yellow gold, was invented by Patek Philippe and is the first example of an annual calendar in the history of watchmaking. The design has a lot of details, and the movement is a very complicated movement. Something about this watch which is very, very important to know, it features very nice hand-applied Roman numerals.
I see that.
Yeah. But one thing about those Roman numerals is that if you pay closer attention to them,
they look like they're treated with a luminous or a glow material. I don't think I've ever seen that before.
Which is very rare.
Yeah,
there are very few examples of watches with Roman numerals that are luminous.
Yeah, certainly a first from them, I would think. Also, I noticed that everything has a pointer style, with the exception of the date window. Is that for the ease of use to see the most practical, which would be the date, because that's done in a digital aperture, while the others are pointer?
Very good question. One of the ideas behind introducing the annual calendar was for the watch to be easier to read and easier to use and easier to service, of course. And that was, if you look at the perpetual calendars, you see all the counters indicating the date, month, and everything.
Right.
So you easily have an aperture here that at a glance you can read the date. And also you have a center second hand, which you don't find them on perpetual calendars.
Yeah, usually those are small pointers with other complications. So it's, again, more like a three-handed watch on a daily basis. But yet you're saying that in the digital window, it's going to move and know when to stop between 30 and 31 on its own?
That is correct. And it's good for 1 year, with one correction needed at the end of the February.
That's amazing. As we move forward, it looks like the men's watches certainly got bigger from there. What was the next thought as far as the sizing or the next generation of these moving forward from the tray?
Very good question. As you mentioned, the 36-37 millimeter was really a customary size for men's wristwatch. That changed over the past few decades, and Patek Philippe introduced a newer generation of that watch, which is this one I have on my hands. It's the reference number 5146 in 18 karat rose gold. This is basically the replacement of the very first generation.
So it looks like it's a little bit bigger, maybe a little bit more modern, with not as dressy with the Roman numerals.
Yes, it is a bigger case. It's a 39 millimeter case. As the demand went higher on bigger watches for men, they came with this idea to make a bigger case for their annual calendar. But yes, and this watch has the moon phase.
That's the first thing I noticed there. Yeah, that the first one did not have. So again, back to the astronomy factor of the original timekeeping with the moon included. Yeah,
Yes.
I see
So
that.
if you, at a glance, you will notice the differences between the two, and they eliminated the 24-hour counter at 6 o'clock
Yeah, the
position,
AM, PM
and
version.
they replaced it with a moon phase, which makes the watch look a lot more elegant.
Yeah, it looks like the bezel on this, because maybe it's a bigger watch, has a rounded bezel here, where this one, if you look closely, kind of is in a concave design.
Exactly.
So I think, again, trying to be a little bit more muscular, if you will, but with more complications. It's very interesting.
It is. Concave is part of the history of annual calendars and some other complications. They are still doing the concave bezel and concave case and lugs as well. But yes, that watch has a dome-shaped bezel, which
Right.
looks a lot more sophisticated on this particular watch.
Are there any other versions of the annual calendar, since that one, I believe, was launched in 2005 as the predecessor to the 1996 model, that show any more advancement or other changes in design that would be interesting to compare? I see you have a few more on the...
As the demand on these watches kept going higher and higher in the market, they came with this idea to introduce the feminine version of the annual calendar.
So an annual calendar specifically for women as well.
Yes, exactly. So at the same year, they introduced this reference number,
Yeah.
5146.
2005.
Yes, 2005. The same year, they introduced a ladies' annual calendar. This is a more modern version of that, but this is inheriting the design elements and design codes
Yeah, it
from the
looks
very
close
first
to the original
ladies.
case.
It has the same exact complications. You have two counters for indication of the days of the week and the month, and also the moon phase and aperture for the date. Hand applied Arabic numerals. And the case is beautifully designed on this one. The case has kind of a wave motif, which is adorned with beautiful diamonds.
I see that it's not just the bezel, it's actually on the center case as well,
Yes.
with curvature.
Yes. So it's a beautiful ladies' complication watch, and the dial is a silver sunburst dial, which makes it a lot more elegant and, of course, a very legible dial.
Again, these are complications that are usually thought of in the men's sector, and it just shows you they're forward thinking about having watches for women and the collectability of complications in high watchmaking. Again, they're quite the visionaries when it comes to things that the market may want. That's amazing, and a very beautiful watch.
Yeah. So as annual calendar watches are very, very important for Patek Philippe because they introduced that to the watchmaking industry.
Sure.
And so as a result, they have introduced a lot of variations, and they come in different types and different displays, different dials.
So what are the latest?
The latest, this watch that I have here is by far one of the most modern and elegant annual calendars that Patek Philippe have ever made. This is the reference number 5205G, 5205G. It's in 18 karat white gold. It's such an elegant watch.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen a case like that in one of their calendar watches.
Yeah. So I will explain
Please.
A little details about the case and the design of this watch. This clean, dynamic, and resolutely modern case is the latest example of one of the Patek Philippe annual calendars.
I would arguably say it's the most sculptured case I've seen in any of the annual calendars. I see it just on the bezel as it's concaving in a way that really catches light, as well as the arc and angles on the sides that look to be even carved out of the center there.
Exactly.
It's
So
very
as
dramatic.
you notice the concave bezel on the very first model that I was showing you, this watch has the same concave bezel, inheriting that beautiful design from 1996 model. And also by looking at the dial of the watch, you notice the main difference between this watch and the previous models. The days of the week, date, and the month are followed on an arc.
Yeah, all on the top
on
instead of the
top.
date window on the bottom with 3 cutouts.
Yes, with 3 cutouts along the arc, which is super, super elegant. And you have faceted baton-shaped hour markers and cabochons that you see on majority of other iconic pieces on Patek Philippe as minute track.
It looks like from here that the edge of the dial, the color is a slightly darker hue
Exactly.
than in the center, almost gradient.
Yes,
is
it's
that,
like a
am I seeing that correctly?
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
it's a sunburst blue, but it's darker on the edge. So it's a beautiful,
Very
and super,
dramatic.
super elegant dial. The other thing I would like to tell you about this design, to tell you how much details, how much attention to details there is on this fantastic timepiece, is the open work logs you see.
It's like bridge architecture. It's really lovely. That may be my favorite, I'm afraid.
There is a different variations. This is the reference number 5205R, which stands for the rose gold. This particular black dial is retired right now, but there's a newer version of this with the green dial, which is absolutely beautiful. And I'm so lucky to have this one here beside the white gold version to show you.
These are becoming works of art, incredibly dressy and yet practical at the same time. I'm falling in love with these annual calendars as my favorite collection. My gosh, it's amazing, absolutely amazing. May I take a closer look at the rose gold version?
Oh yes, absolutely.
Wow. You know, when you see it up close, it's even more amazing. I'm noticing that the faceted batons against that black background is just dancing light as if they're almost gemstone-like. Just incredible play with the light. And also for the first time, I'm noticing that you have the applied chatons or gold dots framing the minute markers all the way around the edge, in addition to circular tracking outside and inside framing the baton index markers. I mean, all of this with this function and still very legible is an incredible play on design. I don't know if I've ever seen anything quite like that.
Yes, all those attention to detail and craftsmanship is to help the aesthetics and, of course, legibility of that spectacular dial.
Incredible. I actually think this may be my favorite reference of all. Do you have a favorite, or?
Yes, of course, the reference number 5205 is by far one of my most favorite Patek Philippe Annual Calendars. As at a glance at that watch, you admire all the craftsmanship and details, attention to details.
That's it.
And the concave bezel, the open work logs, and
exactly.
all those small hand-applied hour markers and minute markers in that
Radiant
watch.
dials, all those.
Radiant dial as well. A lot of details, and I think it looks very, very elegant.
Thank you, Sepehr. Let me ask you, we've covered a lot here. Is there anything else to learn, or is there anything else I should know regarding the annual calendar that we haven't covered?
Yes, absolutely. Annual calendar or any other complications, these are very, very important for Patek Philippe. They are known for making spectacular, complicated watches. The other thing I can say, annual calendar is really, really a useful complication. And that's what Patek Philippe does. Patek Philippe focuses on useful complications.
Well, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to discuss calendars with you, with one of the most illustrious and famous brands in the world.
Absolutely.
Thank you so
Absolutely.
much.
It's always a pleasure.
Same here.